Hello, and welcome back to Season 3, Episode 6 of the Blue Jays Way podcast. Today, I am not joined by Curtis Martin. Curtis and I are busy guys and had to work around our schedules a little bit. But today, I am pleased and privileged to be joined by the one and only Robert Vona, friend of the show.
Let's go. It's so good to be back and hear your voice and see your face and see your voice and hear your face, whatever it may be. We're back in the podcasting game, back on the Blue Jays podcast. We're duck in the house. We got everything in the house ready for the year.
We're ready to go. So lots to talk about this week. Curtis and I had to skip last week because we were both very busy fellas. But we weren't going to do that 2 weeks in a row. So thank you, Robert, for joining us this week and filling in and making sure the Blue Jays way lives on for this episode. But I think we should just get right into it. There's a lot to talk about today. And the main thing is with spring training kind of opening up this past week. There's a lot of things coming out of camp. I think the biggest thing is the new rules coming into effect for this season. And it's kind of been a topic of discussion for the past few months. And now that players are back in camp, it's starting to be it's starting to feel more real, I would say. And especially for players like Kevin Gausman, who is going to be affected by this rule change much more. And just to break it down a little bit, we're seeing the shift ban for this season for our listeners. The MLB shift ban. All infielders have to have their feet on the dirt before the pitch is thrown, and once the pitch is thrown, they can move. The fielders on the right side of second base have to stay on that side until the pitch is thrown. Same for the same is true for the ones infielders on the left side of second base. The pitch clock is a 15-second pitch clock for the pitcher to begin his windup is when the clock stops, and that is when the bases are empty. When there's runner on base, the clock goes up to 20 seconds, so he's a few extra seconds to throw his pitch. And same for the batters have to be alert to the pitcher is the words that are used with 8 seconds remaining on the pitch clock. So that means the batter's feet are set and he is looking towards the mound at the pitcher. He does not have to be ready to swing. So that's just a little breakdown of the pitch clock. We also see the ghost runner rule is here to stay for extra innings. So we're going to get into all this stuff. And if you want to learn more, you can go to MLB's website and it explains them in detail. Or you can go look on Twitter. Shai Davidi and stuff like that has a little bit more depth for you. But this new rule for the windup of the pitchers to stop the clock is going to affect pitchers who have unique windups like Nestor Cortez, Framber Valdez, Kevin Gausman, Kenley Jansen. All of these pitchers are going to have to adjust so they don't get called for balks. They're going to be cracking down on balks a lot more this year because of the new rules. So how do you think Kevin Gausman and how he's going to have to adjust his windup a little bit? How do you think that's going to affect maybe his mentality in the spring? And do you think it'll be an issue come opening day?
I think a big part of being a professional athlete, regardless of what sport it is, you have that ability to, like, you're that good and you're that driven to the point where you can make adjustments and still succeed at a really, really high level. I do think Kevin Gausman is going to have a little bit of a shaky transition to it. I'm sure, once, like anything, once you do it enough times, it's kind of like second nature. But I do think that obviously it's going to be harped on in spring training. And I think it'll have a little bit of an impact because when you've been doing something like that for, this is something that kind of goes beyond just a professional career. It's your mechanics, right? And it's been something that's with you your entire your build up to being a professional baseball player, and then obviously throughout your career as a professional baseball player. I do think that it's going to take obviously a lot of time to adjust to it. But at the same time, like you can say about, is he going to adjust? Is he not going to adjust? He doesn't have a choice. It's going to be called a balk otherwise. So he, if he wants to be able to stay in a game and not give free bases away, he doesn't have a choice but to alter his mechanics. I do think that again, once you do it enough times and after so many reps are done, he'll be okay with it because I feel like everything outside of that mechanics wise can stay relatively the same. It's just a minor adjustment that's probably going to be made, but again, I think by the end of spring training, even a few starts into the season, I don't think it should be a problem for Gosman. No.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think he's at the point in his career where a little adjustment for his windup isn't going to make things like crazy. And he's such a good pitcher that making adjustments has never been a problem for him. And I feel like he made a lot of in-season adjustments last year with the use of his fastball and placement of his fastball that a little bit of a windup adjustment shouldn't be too big of a deal. Especially with the, however many weeks of spring we have, 6 weeks of spring, that he has to adjust. And he was talking about it with the media the other day, and he said, it's just unfortunate. Like, it's just unfortunate that he's one of the guys it's going to affect the most, which is true. But I agree with you. I think he'll be fine, and he has to adjust. So there's no
That's yeah, that's
will he?
exactly my point. There's a
Yeah.
handful of guys across the league that it's gonna affect, and it's just as he said, it sucks that he's one of them. But
Yeah.
I feel like again with that drive that he has and just how good he's been and how minor of an adjustment it is, I don't think it'll be that hard of a transition for him at all.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just moving beyond the Jays, but still staying on top of the rule changes. Is there any rule changes you don't like, or are you a fan of pitch clock, ghost runner, all this stuff?
Just about all. I honestly I can't say one rule change that I like. Call me old school, called me old fashioned, whatever it is, but man, this whole pitch clock thing, I can't get behind it. It just feels so unnatural to the point where it's like you're altering the game. Obviously, you're altering the game because you're implementing new rules, but you're altering the game to the point where it just seems like everything's kind of like everything's a system now. It's not so much like get out there, do your thing. It's now okay, adhere to this, adhere to this, adhere to this, and then we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like the pitch clock is don't get me wrong, I understand why the MLB is making these rule changes. The size of the bags, like or the bases, I don't really care too much. Like I don't find it that big of an issue or a
Yeah.
deal. But the thing with the pitch clock, I really can't get behind it. And it's I feel like it kind of goes to the same thing back to like mechanics wise. Like it's kind of similar to what we saw with Romano last year, where he had to kind of change his delivery. He couldn't go down and all the way back up, and he had to delay by taking his time running out from the bullpen to the mound.
Yeah.
It's just stuff like that that I think, you know, it's been a part of you for so long. Kind of like what I was mentioning with Gosman. Like your mechanics, and what feels right is what feels right. Um, I honestly like, of course, I don't wish anybody to get hurt, but I wouldn't be surprised if this leads to a few more injuries here and there for pitchers, just because it is a little bit more. Obviously, it's more rushed and it could be a little bit more unnatural.
Mhm.
But again, outside of that, like I don't really have an issue with a lot of things. I still am on the fence about the ghost runner and starting with a runner on second base in extra innings, but we'll get into that a little bit later if we decide to.
Yeah. Uh,
Um, yeah,
that's interesting. It's interesting to hear opinions of the new rule changes from someone who played baseball for a while, like yourself. Because interestingly enough, I've probably talked about this on the podcast before, but I've never played baseball before, like outside of like across the street where there's a diamond. I've hit a couple balls, but like personally, I think for the greater of the MLB's popularity and American fan base, I think the rule changes are going to do them really well and be really good for the game and its popularity. But it's cool to hear from your point of view. Like, I do agree that it changes the flow of the game, and I feel like um it will impact quite a few players for the first couple of months. But they're going to get used to it, obviously, because like we said about Gossman, they have to. There's no that you have to get used to it. Um, but the pitch clock, I think I will be a fan of it, but it's going to take me a while to get used to. The bigger bases, I like it. It's going to mean more steals, and that's just more exciting in my opinion. The Ghost Runner, I've never been a fan of, and I don't like. I've been on the fence with it before, but like the more that it happens and I think of it, like I don't like it. I'd rather the game be played, and in full and a full game with the same rules throughout the entire game. Um, but not like we can do anything about that.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, unless you have anything else to say about the rule changes, I think we'll move on to something that Curtis and I missed because we were unable to last week, unable to record. Bichette and the Blue Jays avoided arbitration and signed a 3-year deal that will pay him around $36 million with added bonuses for stuff like MVP and probably hit leaders and stuff like that. Some details we won't know, I'm sure. But so this deal basically just buys out his arbitration. He was going to be on the team regardless, but from what I see, and I'll let you talk to it in a second, is an improved relationship. Bichette gets the money he wants. The risk for both sides is still there, and without having to go to a huge contract extension, and avoiding an arbitrator like we saw with Corbin Burns and Milwaukee, who couldn't avoid arbitration, and Milwaukee beat Burns in the arbitration hearing. It does not lead to good relationships, and this avoidance of going to arbitration, I think, is huge. No matter what anyone says, I think it's huge for both the team and Bichette in negotiations, especially when thinking in the long term. But what did you think of the deal? Did it kind of shock you, or were you expecting something like this to kind of come to fruition?
I don't think I would say it shocked me. I think, a lot of people kind of understood that it was only a matter of time before the Jays were gonna have to open up the checkbooks and start, signing and extending a bunch of these guys. But I really like the point you made about the relationship. I think that's the first thing you take away from something like this, is that it's good to see that, two parties are on the same page, and everybody kind of benefits from it. I mean, the Jays get to keep their shortstop that's led the league in hits for the past 2 years.
Mm.
And Bichette gets the money he wants, like you said. I think a lot of it also has to do with where the current state of the team is. Obviously the Jays are a threat to a lot of teams in the AL, and I think Bo knows that, and he wants to be a part of a team that, wants to kick some butt, for lack of a better term. And I feel like that kind of drove him back to signing. Obviously, I mean, hey, 11 million or dollars or so a year isn't too bad either. But I definitely think that's another driving factor that sometimes doesn't get a lot of attention. Like Corbin Burns, for example. Milwaukee had a great year last year, but I don't think anybody's really banking on them to kind of make a deep run in the playoffs. Whereas the Jays, for example, are right up there with the best of them. So I feel like a couple more factors went into it than meets the eye. But yeah, I mean, it's a great deal for both parties. There's nothing really to complain about.
Agreed. And I'm not going to get deep into what I'm about to say because I could spend a whole episode talking about it. Had a little seizure there, my bad. But I believe Chris Black tweeted this, and for those of you who don't know, I believe he's a producer. Apologies if I got his role wrong, at Sportsnet. And he tweets about players and off-season like statistics and analysis of players throughout the offseason, and he produces some of the coolest threads I've ever seen. So if you have a chance, go check it out on Twitter. But he suggested that if Milwaukee is in a bad place when they come to visit Toronto, I believe in May or something like that, he thinks the talks for Corbin Burns to Toronto would ramp up quite a lot because of the relationship that they've strained. And I don't know if he's heading to free agency next year or the year after, but it's soon, obviously, because he's in arbitration. So that's just something interesting that I thought. I talked about it in the offseason. I thought Kirk to Milwaukee and Corbin Burns back here in some sort of deal could have been a thing, but obviously it didn't end up working out. But we're not going to go into that because we could spend way too much time there. What we can get into is the exceptional beard on Yusei freaking Kikuchi. I don't know if a beard helps confidence in the whole fan base, but as soon as I saw that man walk into Dunedin, Florida with a full beard, I'm thinking Cy Young or bust, honestly. Like, I don't think anything other than the Cy Young Award being awarded to this man this season. What have you seen pictures of the beard in his bullpen sessions?
So I have. I also looked at some videos that were surfacing on Twitter. I think it was Keegan Madison. Oh my God, Matheson.
Nice.
Sorry, I don't know why I couldn't pronounce that for a sec, posted a video from behind the catcher, and it was just Kikuchi going through it. You know what, man? Like, he looks pretty good.
Yeah.
I know it's early, but hey, he looks good. And there were a lot of comments flying around saying about things that he's changed or things that he's tweaked. And
Mhm.
honestly, I kind of like it just because you go from look at the season that he had last year. Like, realistically, what does he have to lose? Um, a few tweaks here and there aren't gonna make or break his status as a pitcher.
Yeah.
They could, don't get me wrong, but I feel like, the beard is just another thing, like kind of like a superstition almost. New look, new fresh year, fresh look. Just kind of, a new chapter in his career, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, hey, he looked good, and like I said, I think some people were talking about him changing his arm slots and kind of getting rid of that kind of delay that he had in his delivery. So, a few retools here and there, and I don't mind it, honestly. I don't.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think new year, new me kind of thing. The beard is just the biggest takeaway for me. But I've heard there's new curveball in the mix, and he's completely dropped the cutter. I don't know if that's gonna be the case come opening day. But I do foresee him as the fifth starter in the rotation. And Mitch White hasn't started throwing yet, I believe, because of a shoulder injury. That has got him a slow start into the spring. Um, so I think it makes the most sense to predict and to assume that Kikuchi is going to take the fifth spot, only because we don't have a lefty in the rotation, and
Yeah.
I feel like that fifth spot is his spot to lose. Um, and I'm really hoping the new mechanics, new pitch, new beard is just like he's building up that
Yeah.
confidence and getting ready to hopefully have a decent year, even if it's like a 4.25 ERA with
Yeah.
150 strikeouts or whatever. Like, that'd be great. I'd be
Yeah.
completely fine with that as my fifth starter. Um,
Yeah.
so we'll see what comes out of that. But
Yeah. It's like I said, like what do you have to lose? Like, you're a fifth
exactly,
starter, your fifth
exactly.
spot in the starting rotation. Like, they're not
Yeah,
stakes
he
aren't at an all-time high.
he's pitching to stay in the rotation, and I
Yeah.
think he wants to be a starter, even though he had success in the bullpen at the end of last year. I think his stuff is too good to be in the bullpen. I think he can be a really effective starter if he's pitching to his strengths, and his confidence is high, which I think is a big part of the spring. Is they're going to try and get him in there a lot and get the confidence up before the games start to matter. Um, but looking at other pitchers in the spring, one person that stood out to everyone, and obviously he's always going to stand out because he's Jordan Romano, is our big the Markham Menace, the closer.
Markham Mamba.
Yeah, Markham Mamba. That's a good one. Never heard that one yet. Um, we're about, I don't know, what's today? The 17th, I believe. Yeah, 17th. I believe we're about 6 days, maybe 4 days into spring training of pitchers and catchers reporting. Some of them showed up a few days early. The official day was, I don't know, the 15th or whatever. Jordan Romano's thrown 95 plus with his fastball already. I like mentioned, I've never played baseball professionally or in a league or whatever. You have. You've played baseball in a league before, in a pretty high level league. What guys maybe weren't throwing 95, maybe they were. I have no idea. But what does that say about Romano in his off season with hitting 95 3-4 days into camp?
That's absurd.
Yeah.
That's incredible. You can only imagine what he's going to be throwing when he really starts to get loose and really, feel it in the middle of the season, like mid-season form, obviously. I mean, I think it just goes to show, like, you got to take care of yourself in the off season. And again, kind of similar to what I said with Bo, I think a lot of guys on this team, not just Bo and not just Romano, but a lot of guys on this team realize where the team's at and what they need to do to take them to the next level. Because this is, I think, year 3 or 4 now of the Jays being a real, a playoff team, and a threat. And I feel like this year, everybody's kind of stringing together and saying, like, not that this is the last straw, but this is the year where we need to make a push. This is the year where we need to make a statement, because everybody's been on them for the past couple of years and they came up short both times.
Mm.
We won't talk about what happened last year for emotional reasons. But I think that's just kind of more motivating, and I think you're seeing it early on in spring training, obviously with everybody's performance, whether it be Romano throwing 95 or Kikuchi kind of tweaking his mechanics. But even like I know some videos on Twitter surfaced of George Springer dancing around, and like it seems like everybody's having a good time. Everybody seems like they're on the same page, and I feel like that's something that is really really valuable when it comes to a team sport, especially baseball. That's definitely something that's only going to have positive impacts on everybody throughout the dugout. So, but yes, not to not to take away from Romano through a 95, because that's just wizard type stuff. It's insane. It's crazy.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of the team came into camp ready. Like obviously players come into camp ready, but I feel like the entire team came in prepared and ready to get to work. Not just because some of the guys are going to the World Baseball Classic, but because they realized that they messed up in the wildcard series last year, and this year it's kind of time to get things moving. And I think it's the beginning of the year. The team has to shoot for getting the division title.
Sure.
And yeah, with Romano throwing 95, if he can just pitch 9 innings every game for 162 games, that would be perfect.
In a perfect world.
Yeah. But taking a look around the league, we've talked about the Jays quite a bit already, and there's going to be a lot more to come. A lot of World Baseball Classic stuff to come in the next few weeks when Curtis returns, and hopefully a few guests before the season gets underway. But Manny Machado recently told the general public that he will be opting out of his contract with the Padres at the end of the season and going to free agency to make a lot more money than he already is. I personally think it's genius. Why would you stay when there's more money to be made on the market? It's maybe says something about how he feels about the Padres and where he thinks they could end up. They've made a lot of moves. They've done a lot of different things, and maybe he feels Juan Soto could be a priority for them, which would make sense because he's Juan Soto and he's super young and super talented. But do you think that's a smart move for Machado to test free agency, or do you think he's better staying put?
See, I mean, I think when you talk about stuff like this, it has, there's two sides to the story, and it almost kind of revolves around what you value more as a player. Personally speaking, I know, I want to win. I don't care how much I get paid. I want to win. Like, I don't think you can really put a dollar value on in terms of winning a World Series, for example. But then again, if you are somebody that values, how much that paycheck, how many zeros that paycheck has every 2 weeks, or however many times you get it, then yeah, like obviously I don't, there's no other way around it. And I mean, just taking a look like at what he did last year, obviously second in MVP, slash line of 298, 366, 531. That's stellar. That's beyond stellar.
Yeah.
So again, I think there's no other way around it really, other than what do you value as a player? Do you want to win? Do you want to make a lot of money? Do you want to win and make a lot of money? Because right now I feel like the position he's in, he's making a lot of money and he's on a winning team.
Yeah.
Surrounded by a bunch of other young, talented players like Soto or, whoever else it may be. But I don't know. Personally, I'm not too crazy on the idea of him leaving. I don't really understand it that much because, again, I value winning more than, making however much money it is. Plus, I don't know realistically how many other teams are willing to fork up more than $30 million a year for Machado.
Yeah, I think it might have had a lot to do with Bogarts signing in San Diego as well. Maybe he took that personally, kind of thing, but who knows? But just as we were speaking here, we won't go too much into it because it's kind of, I don't know. The Jays were looking at Robbie Grossman from what I was hearing, but he just signed with the Texas Rangers on a 1-year, $2 million deal. So that's a loss for the Jays. Could have swooped in there. But just transitioning a little bit of World Baseball Classic before we wrap things up. Clayton Kershaw has announced that he's opted out of the World Baseball Classic because reported because of insurance issues. It's not 100% confirmed. It's not an injury. He's 100% healthy. So a huge loss for the United States, like massive, massive loss. He was probably going to be their number one starter. And it also hurts that they lost Nestor Cortez a couple days ago due to a hamstring injury. So Team USA down 2 starters heading into the World Baseball Classic. Curtis and I are going to get much more in detail with a World Baseball Classic episode, likely coming next week or the week after. But do you think those 2 injuries puts the Dominican Republic at the top of the food chain here heading into the tournament?
To be honest, I don't know if the Dominican Republic was ever not at the top of the food chain. I mean, just do yourself a favor and go look at that lineup, man.
Yeah.
Like, find one hole in that lineup.
Even their
if
starting
it's
rotation is just ridiculous.
Like, are you kidding me? Like, even if it's like the 9 hitter, whoever it may be.
Oh yeah.
Even then, so man, the other 8 are like, come on.
Yeah, it's absurd. It's actually absurd, but it's definitely a huge loss for the United States. I think they were, with Kershaw and Cortez, I think they were up with Dominican Republic at the first place kind of spot, or maybe
like favorites.
Favorites. You could also kind of include Japan in there as well. They're an unreal team. And there's a lot of underrated teams, but we won't get too much into that. But I definitely think this puts Dominican Republic as the standing favorites ahead of the United States. But I'm excited for the tournament. Are you going to watch much of it, or you plan on watching it?
Definitely. It's been a long time coming
for
the World Baseball Classic. And the last one that they had was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you're a baseball fan, I don't know how you wouldn't enjoy it. It's the best of the best going or mostly best of the best going head to head. And it's a little different vibe. Like you're representing your home country, right? It's not like you're playing for a club team anymore and you're getting paid to do it. It's more so like a pride thing. So I feel like it's going to be a lot more emotional in some aspects, and it's going to be good baseball all around. So there's no reason not to watch it.
It's a great way to get into the game too. If you're not a baseball fan, it's such an exciting tournament, and I think it's going to do wonders for the game, and even for the regular season. I think it's going to do big things for getting guys ramped up even more than they would coming out of spring, because they're trying to win it. They want to win, obviously, the World Baseball Classic. So exciting nonetheless. And you know what, Robert, this was amazing, and I'm so happy you could join me today. Where can the people find you?
The people can find me on Instagram at Robert Vona, Twitter at Vona_Robert. Kind of switch it up a little bit.
Gotta switch it up.
Gotta switch it up. And as always, you can see all of my work on Over the Line Sports at overthelinesports.ca, along with some other great, whether it be football, hockey, baseball season starting to pick up. Basketball season's kind of at the midway point, but Formula One season starting up soon, and I'm sure we're gonna have tons and tons of good stuff coming from various writers about that. A lot of it's always a good time to be a sports fan, and
100%.
It's an even better time to be a baseball fan. So
World Baseball Classic, baby, can't wait. As for myself, you can follow me on Twitter at Procyk Tyler, PROCYK Tyler. You can also hit me up on Instagram at @tprocyk_. You can check out all the latest baseball articles, my own articles, hockey articles. Hopefully, I kind of want to write F1 this year. I'm huge into the sport nowadays. It's super exciting. I'd like to shout out the Static Point Band for their concert on last week in Toronto. They had an unreal show that was just awesome, super fun to be at. Definitely check out the band. They have our intro for us this season and did an exceptional job with it, and we're really happy. So thank you, Adam Collings and the Static Point Band. Very clutch, very good. Please check them out. But that's going to do it for us this week. We want to remind all of you to like and subscribe to this podcast. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and make sure to check us out on social media at OTL Sports CA on Twitter and Instagram, and check out all the latest articles on www.overthelinesports.ca, as well as the YouTube channel at Over the Line Sports Entertainment. Thank you guys, and we'll catch you next time.